You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, but today's case is a solved one about mannequins who were found to be a murdered couple. Now, no one could have ever predicted the monster among them. A case filled with hate, jealousy, and hundreds of pieces of evidence. When a killer refused to give a motive, theories would run amok, but each one is as infuriating as the next. And I also want to wish you all a happy Pride Month. I support each and every one of you. I love each and every one of you. And I hope you remember that you are worthy of respect and love and happiness. Now, this is a story about homophobia. There is a lot of possibly triggering instances in this case. So I do want to let any of you know that up front. And if you don't know, it is my absolute passion to tell these stories, and I mean no harm or disrespect when I do so. So if that's something you'd like to support me in doing, all you have to do is make sure you're subscribed with the post notification bell on, giving this video a thumbs up, and leaving a nice comment down below. Now let's get back to this story. So it was 2014 in Texas, and Crystal Jackson was a 24-year-old girl who was living with her parents, Mary and Yvonne, in Houston. Now, Crystal was known to be this ambitious, hardworking girl who was working really hard for herself to be able to buy a car and move out on her own. She was a little thing standing at under 5 feet. That's why she always wore heels. She also loved to wear lashes, big earrings, and lots of makeup. It just made her feel better, and it made her happy to do so. Her family knew her as someone who was anything but weak. In fact, she went with her father a lot of the times to pick up the decomposing bodies of the people who had passed away, because her father was Reverend Yvonne, and he was a church director at some points as well. And so they would go pick up the bodies together, and she never really had a problem with doing this. Of course, it made her sad, but the actual bodies themselves didn't gross her out, didn't make her fear them at all or anything. When she was in high school, she actually wasn't that interested in school. She was a little bit of a rebel by this point, and she still managed to get decent grades while doing so. She was actually once caught for stealing earrings and innocently told her mother that they got stuck on her coat, and that's how they got out the door with her. Now, of course, Mary didn't believe this, but she knew that Crystal had a good head on her shoulders and that hopefully she would learn from this lesson. She also just had this mischievous side to her. This would all change though when she got pregnant in high school. Now, by the age of 24, Crystal was still adjusting to her more adult responsibilities with being a mother. She was also one to not be afraid to tell somebody off when they were talking bad to her, and this made it difficult for her to keep a job, especially in retail and food. She was just having a hard time getting the faculty to keep her on board when she would talk bad to the customers, but most of the time she was just defending herself. She then found a job working as a security guard. This was for the night shift, which then she would take the bus home since she didn't have a car. And then by that point, during the day, she could take her daughter, Zanaya, who is 5 years old by this point, and take her to school and then spend time with her after school before she had to go to work. It was like the perfect job for her, so she still felt like she was really balancing work and her daughter. Zanaya was Crystal's everything. She would buy her the most extravagant gifts, the most expensive shoes. Even though she didn't have a lot of money herself, she wanted to spend it on her daughter over herself. So when she was at work, her parents, Mary and Yvonne, actually watched Zanaya for her, and then of course she would take over when she got back home. Crystal would also call her parents every single day when she was on the bus ride home from work, which was about 5:30 a.m. every single morning. Crystal and Zanaya's father were actually no longer together, but Crystal did have a significant other in her life. She was in love with her girlfriend, Brittany Cosby. She was also 24 years old, and they had met within the last 2 years. They were known to be two peas in a pod after meeting on the Metro bus and seeing each other and just instantly having that attraction to one another. And then it was even more than attraction. They were so compatible down to the core. They wanted the same things and they were so in love, and they wanted to become a family for Zanaya. They wanted to be her mothers and really show her that love and support and get a car and a house. Brittany still lived with her grandmother, Annie, and this was a 90-year-old who had raised her since birth due to her mother, Brittany's mother, being very, very young when she gave birth to Brittany, so she gave up custody to Annie. Her father was actually Larry, who was in prison. So between the two of them, Annie was the best option. But Brittany grew up being this playful, loving, happy girl who loved to hang out with her family, but also loved her alone time and just kind of found a smaller circle to be better for her. She loved to dress in more masculine clothes. By middle school, Brittany was actually struggling with being attached to a very rough type of crowd that made her do things she wasn't really comfortable with. And she actually went with a group of friends to shatter a window and break into a house where they stole multiple things. They were caught, and immediately after this, everything in Brittany's life changed. She knew she no longer wanted to even be around these type of people. She got a job at KFC. She began working, and she paid back everything she owed this family for breaking in. Then she realized that her 90-year-old great-grandmother was someone who was going to need a lot of help taking care of herself. So Brittany took it upon herself to go learn some classes about nursing so she could help Annie just get around and have a better life without putting her in the nursing home. And at the same time, she got a job at Starbucks because, throughout the years she had went on from KFC to Starbucks and was a barista. She also began going to church, and she actually loved poetry and songwriting. And that was something that wasn't really known about her, but it was found later that she was such an amazing writer, and it really just was something that she kept for herself. Brittany and Crystal were both in such good places in their life when they met, and everything seemed to be aligning because together they were even better than how amazing they were separately. And Zanaya also loved Brittany, so this was absolutely perfect. And that is when they bought a 2006 Kia Sorento together. They were ecstatic that they had finally gotten this for themselves. They were moving closer and closer to their dream life. Friends and family said that they were a power couple who were very attached and very happy. And on Facebook, Crystal actually uploaded a photo of the two of them with a caption, "Words can't explain how you make me feel. From the moment we met, I just knew you was the one for me. Through all the tears, laughter, the good and the bad, I still love you always and forever." This was until it was all ripped away, because on March 7th, a beer delivery driver arrived at the Fisherman's Cove food market. This was on 7th Street and Texas 87. This was basically on Port Boulevard on the peninsula, and it was not around anything but an abandoned hotel. This was around 7:30 a.m. and this was also 2 hours from Houston, where these girls were from. This delivery driver had walked around back to get rid of some of the cardboard boxes after delivering the beer to the market, and he put the cardboard boxes in the dumpster only to see two mannequins on the ground near there. And he went back inside and he was asking them about how many mannequins they had thrown out that day, and unfortunately no one knew what he was talking about. People from the building went outside, followed him to this dumpster, and they all realized that these were two dead bodies. Now, like I said, there was this Fisherman's Cove market. The dumpster was right here, and then on the other side of the dumpster was that abandoned hotel. It was completely vacant. So there was no chance that somebody, from there knew what was going on, and people from this market had no idea either. The clerk was shaken so badly she actually had to go home, and the cops were called. But meanwhile, all the way back in Houston, Crystal and Brittany's family members began to get worried that they weren't hearing from them. The day prior to them being found on Thursday, March 6th, Mary and Yvonne began calling Crystal because she hadn't called them on her usual time of coming home on the bus at 5:30 a.m. She wasn't answering any texts or social media posts, and Crystal also never took Zanaya to school that morning. like she always did. Her family knew that Crystal was this very independent girl. She did what she wanted, and she was old enough to do so. She wouldn't have forgotten to take Zanaya to school, though. They knew that her being a parent was her #1 priority. So that is when they began to call hospitals, jails, and morgues, asking if anyone had seen Crystal. But nobody had. Meanwhile, Brittany's grandmother, Annie, had realized she had never come home that day either. By Friday, both families knew something was wrong. They had no idea that these two girls had just been found with their legs entangled, lying on the cement outside of the dumpster. Captain Barry Cook found that one woman was lying face up with her eyes open, and she had a gunshot wound to the head. Just one, but it had been enough to kill her. The other body had a sheet wrapped around her head, and when they took that off, they found that this woman had been severely beaten. At first, they believed that they were both boys because they both were wearing pants, and then they believed that one of them was because they were dressing in this more masculine clothing and because they were wearing work boots. But as we know, that is what Brittany liked to wear. The autopsies revealed that the first woman had the gunshot wound to her head that killed her instantly, but the second woman had a blow that instantly cracked her skull and broke her neck. And then the beatings continued even though there was no chance that she was still alive. She had been beaten to the point of being unrecognizable. There was basically no blood left in her body. Her brain was coming out of her skull, and it was a horrific sight. Investigators knew that this was overkill, but they also knew this wasn't where the murders occurred because there just wasn't enough blood. Although these women had no IDs on them, identifying them actually wasn't as hard as investigators thought it was going to be. And this wasn't because their families identified them. You see, at the dumping grounds, they had found a white and green board that appeared to be like something you'd find on a shutter of a house. They had blood splatter on them, and then they also found an envelope, also covered in blood. They assumed that this envelope went with the girls and the shutter, and so they tried to get a closer look. And between the blood, they found a name. It was addressed to Brittany Crosby. It also gave her address. Now, it was strange that this envelope had made it all the way from the possible crime scene to the dumping grounds. And so that is when they started to believe that this killer had actually brought it for one reason or another, to use it, or even if on accident he brought it and then he left it on accident as well. Captain Cook said the debris found there was unusually placed, the positions and locations of the bodies. There was really no rhyme or reason why they were left in such a public, easily found location. It was almost like whoever did it wanted them to be found and wanted us to know they were killed there. There were probably a million places you could have hidden those bodies. Investigators immediately drove the 2 hours to Brittany Crosby's home to inform her family. And they found Brittany's grandmother as well as her father, Larry, and they were told of the horrific way that Brittany had been found. She had been the one who was beaten to death. But after they collected themselves the best that they could, they were told that there was another girl, and they were asked if they knew who this could be. They immediately said it was her girlfriend, Crystal Jackson. Now investigators received Crystal's family's information, and they went to Mary and Yvonne and told them what had happened, how their daughter had been found, and Mary refused to believe it. She refused to look at the pictures, and she said that they had the wrong person. That is until she noticed the tattoo on the body. It was the name Zanaya, and she instantly knew it was Crystal.
They killed her, Mama. They killed her, Mama.
LaQuidia Jackson's gut-wrenching agony
What about my knee?
heard through this South Houston neighborhood. Just yesterday, her sister, 24-year-old Crystal Jackson, was found murdered.
What did they do to you for you to kill my sister? You beat my sister up. You just... You messed her up to the point she can't breathe no more.
They didn't have to die for whatever it was. It was so petty. It wasn't, why come to that conclusion?
Cosby's family is equally grieving, now pleading for someone to come forward with answers.
To give us closure as a family, just come forward, because we need closure at this point.
Have a conscience, and come forward and just be honest about what happened.
These two women were no longer Jane Doe's, and the blood spatter on the hair and the shutter also belonged to Crystal. But now investigators needed to look for motives. They knew that there was a huge possibility that this was a hate crime. This would also make sense as to why the kill was so brutal in some ways, but in other ways it appeared to be more of a personal killing. You see, a hate crime could have been due to these women being Black individuals, or these women being gay. Racism and homophobia were things that investigators had to look into. I cannot tell you how well they looked into these, but it's disgusting to think that this could have happened in 2014, but it's something that can happen even today. Innocent humans who are killed by someone ignorant and heartless, fueled by hate and a refusal to accept humans for who they are. But hate crimes happen every day, and there was a huge chance that that's exactly what this was. They also began looking into the possibility of this being an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend of either one of the girls. Investigators started talking to the family members, hoping to kind of fill in some of the gaps, and all of which were willing to talk to them. None looked suspicious. They all appeared to be grieving. They found that the day prior to them going missing to their families was on Wednesday, March 5th. And the family said that that night they had gone out to get pizza for dinner for the three of them, and they brought it back to the Cosby residence with Annie. The next morning, Zanaya was taken out to the car to be taken to school because she was going to a field trip to the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. However, she wasn't taken by Crystal or Brittany. Mary actually worked at the school that Zanaya went to, and she went and got her granddaughter, and she wasn't sure where the girls had gone. But investigators still did not know what happened after this. They didn't know how Zanaya got back inside and how Crystal and Brittany ended up murdered. They had no idea where their car had gone either, and an APB was sent out for a silver SUV with gray trim and unknown paper tags because of course they had just bought the car. Their family said nothing was out of the ordinary. Of course, Mary had come to get Zanaya later that day, and they kind of didn't know what was going on. And that's where things are a little bit fuzzy. I couldn't find exactly what happened with Zanaya that day. Some sources say that, yeah, she actually did stay home that whole day because nobody took her and she just watched cartoons. Other sources say that Mary went and picked her up and took her to school. Either way, this little girl was alone for a little bit of time, possibly with the killer, because she went from being with her mother, who was about to take her to school, to her mother being murdered. Everyone claimed that no one had a problem with either of these girls. They were loved by everyone. Zanaya's father was then looked into because, of course, the father of the child left, and the ex-spouse of the victim can have something to do with it. So they went and found that his name was Reginald Jackson, and they brought him in, and it was actually found that he had not been in Zanaya or Crystal's life since she was born. Like I said, she was in high school, so they kind of just separated, and Crystal was completely okay with this. She was fine with being a single mother. She didn't want to be around Reginald, and she didn't force him to be around them. He was brought in for questioning, where he claimed that he had nothing to do with the murders, and he also agreed to do a DNA test. This was immediately tested against the crime scene, and this was not a match, so Reginald was released. The two families seemed to be doing a really good job of consoling one another, and the Jacksons were even going to help the Cosbys pay for Brittany's funeral because they didn't have life insurance on her, and the Jacksons had life insurance on Crystal. Then more came out about Crystal and Brittany's personal life. You see, Crystal's family had quite the hard time accepting the fact that she was gay. They had grown up believing in religions that believed homosexuality was evil. Mary began to worry that people would look at them differently, and Yvonne was very standoffish when it came to Brittany and her coming over, and he had even asked her to put a string around her sagging pants before she would come inside the house. He wanted nobody to know that they were actually a couple and not just friends. It was said that Crystal's family loved her regardless, but there was still that looming feeling that she didn't fit the mold that they had made for her. Yvonne would say that Crystal was not gay. She was just confused. But that didn't stop Crystal and Brittany from being together, and they even had the same problems with Brittany's family because her grandmother Annie would not allow them to be a couple in her house. She said she was a nosy 90-year-old who would have known if they were together under her roof, and she did not see this. These two women had to hide their love from the world, from their own families, which is horrible enough. But then the next thought had to be, is that what caused their murders? Well, 2 days prior to the murders, it was revealed by Crystal's father, Yvonne, that he and Crystal had gotten into a fight over Crystal wanting to move out to be with Brittany and her daughter, and he wanted her and Zaniyah to stay with them. And that's when Crystal actually left the Cosby home to go get pizza with Brittany and then take it to the Cosby residence. From there, of course, we know she vanished. While she was missing, Yvonne had actually told Mary that he was going to go out and look for her with his gun, and that if she was with Brittany and Brittany was doing something to Crystal, he was going to do something to Brittany. He never clarified exactly what he meant, but he did have a gun. Hearing this, investigators wanted to find this gun and test the bullets against the murder weapon that they believed was used. Now, it turned out that the woman who was hit in the head with the bullet was Crystal, who would have been his daughter. But this seemed to make sense if this was Crystal's father, who did not like Brittany, who took out the most anger on Brittany. However, the ballistics test came back and his gun was not a match. 4 days had gone by since they had found the bodies on the dumping grounds, but that's when a clue was located elsewhere. A man who was simply walking his dog on a trail in Houston found a wallet in the grass. This had a license inside, and so he had the address. He sent it back, but then he saw that same name on the news about a murdered girl, and he immediately called investigators saying that he had found the license of Brittany Cosby in Houston, where she lived, but 2 hours away from where she was found. This trail was also only a few miles away from Brittany's home, or the Cosby residence. This led them to confirm that the murders had not happened in Port Bolivar. They had happened in Houston. Investigators then began looking for surveillance cameras around the home. There was a liquor store that actually caught the car leaving early that Thursday morning, which is when they disappeared. But unfortunately, all of this footage was too blurry to identify the driver. Then they looked at surveillance cameras around the dump site, and that is when they found the 2006 Kia Sorento on the Bolivar Ferry. This was a mile away from the dump site as the car exited, and the footage showed that at 9:18 p.m., this car was actually stopped by a ferryman, or basically like a security guard, who wanted to tell the driver that their headlight was out. When investigators found this worker, he claimed that he had stopped the car to tell him about the headlight, and that's when a man in the driver's seat got out of the car, went around to the front, looked at the headlight, and then got back in the car. The worker thought it was nothing out of the ordinary, but it was actually believed that Crystal and Brittany's bodies were in the back of that car at that time, and this worker didn't think to check inside. This worker was, of course, able to help them with a composite sketch, and they came up with that he was a tall black man with brown hair and eyes, a small mustache, a soul patch, was well-groomed, an average build in his late 20s to 30s, and he seemed very nervous and acted like he didn't know how to drive that car very well. Both families spent the day around the dump site praying, and civil rights activist Quanell X led the prayer asking for God to help solve this horrible crime and to end the no snitch policy because it has no place in the community. And afterwards they were handing out these sketches of this man that this ferryman had seen, and reporters followed them around capturing this footage. But that is when investigators in this case, of course, saw this footage of the composite sketch, and everybody working it was looking at it, and it didn't match anyone they had seen. So they were back to square one. The only person who even remotely went by this description was Reginald, Zaniyah's father, but only because he was around that same age, the 20s and 30s, not because he looked anything like the photo. This witness ended up not being as helpful as they had hoped, but that's when another witness came forward, a woman named Cora, who had a strange story to tell investigators. She worked at the Cosby home as Annie's other caregiver when Brittany was not there, and she noticed that the garage or the carport was completely cleaned after the murders, and she said it was never clean. The years she had been working there, she had never seen it clean, and it was completely spotless. She said that the night before Brittany and Crystal were murdered, she had witnessed a fight. You see, when they came home with their pizza, Brittany's father, Larry, began complaining that he had to eat his bologna sandwich when they got pizza. Brittany was very snarky with him, and Cora said she told him, well, you can have pizza if you go out and get a job. Cora said she did not know what happened after that. She got up and left because it was just too uncomfortable. Her shift was over anyway, so she just left. But Larry's sister, Ebony, also said that Brittany had called her and said that she was fighting with Larry, and Ebony just told her to stay out of his way. Hearing this, of course, investigators began looking into Brittany's father, Larry Cosby. If you remember at the beginning, I told you he had been in prison. Well, throughout the years, he had been in and out for several sexual assaults and weapons charges, but he was convicted of sexual assault in 1994 and sentenced to 10 years. When he was released, he went right back in for failing to register as a sex offender. He got 2 years for this, and that is when he was released in October of 2013, just about 5 months before the murders occurred. When he was released, he began living with his grandmother, Annie, and his daughter, Brittany. He didn't have a job. He was sleeping on the couch in the living room with a curtain as a wall, like a makeshift bedroom. And investigators decided to head to the Cosby residence to just do some outside searching before they could get the warrant. That is when they found 5 bricks with drops of blood. They also realized that this home had the exact same shutters as the one found at the dumping ground, but one was missing. 6 days after the bodies were found, the biggest break in this case occurred. Do you remember the envelope with Brittany's address on it they had found at the crime scene? Well, a fingerprint had been found on it. It was the perfect left thumb fingerprint, and when it was sent in, there was a perfect match. The fingerprint belonged to none other than Larry Cosby, Brittany's own father. Larry was easy to locate too because he was at the vigil for his daughter where he was saying how much he missed Brittany, his baby girl. He was begging for people to come forward with information. He was brought in for questioning, and he claimed that the shutter was already gone by the time that he got home from prison. He also said he had no idea why his fingerprint was at the crime scene. He didn't want to be read his Miranda rights because he believed that that meant he was under arrest, and he was more interested in how long the interrogation was going to take than helping investigators. He then shut down and refused to talk at all. At the same time, the warrant came through for Cosby's home, and so they went and began to search there. And instantly they knew they had the right man because inside there was blood found on the door as well as in Larry's makeshift room. Rugs had been put down on the carpet to cover the blood, but there was still so much. There was droplets on his clothing, on his bed, everywhere. And they also did luminol testing, which showed that so much more blood had been cleaned up. This was in his room and in the garage. And next they found the bullets that matched those used on Crystal. According to the police report, they also seized a hammer, which I'm theorizing is what was used to beat Brittany, but this was never specified anywhere that I could find. But the bedsheet wrapped around Brittany's head also belonged to Larry's bed. 307 pieces of individual evidence were collected, and on top of that, Larry's phone records provided a perfect map of where he was that day, and it led them right to the dumping ground. Larry said he did not know what happened. He was shown the crime scene photos while investigators got very upset at him, yelling at him, shoving the pictures in his face, telling him that he did that to his daughter, then he was sleeping in the room with her blood on it, and that he was basically disgusting. And He showed zero emotion to any of this. He didn't break down. He didn't cry. He was more interested in where they found that fingerprint at the crime scene. He wanted to know how they got it. But after 5.5 hours of trying to talk to him, trying to get deals out of him so he would confess, he didn't. He refused, and Larry was then charged with tampering with evidence for moving the bodies while they searched to find more evidence to, of course, charge him with the murders. Captain Cook said that there was a lot of little evidence, but they didn't have enough to prove it yet. Larry also had a slight alibi because he was with his girlfriend all day on that Thursday. Investigators theorized that Thursday morning, Zenaia was put in the car. Her mother, Crystal, was buckling her in when she heard Brittany and Larry having a fight in the house, and she ran in only to find that he was killing her. And then as she ran out the door, he shot her, which is why the blood was on the shutter. He then went out for the day only to come home to put the couple in their car and to drive them to the dumpster. A month later, the 2006 Kia Sorento was found. Larry's girlfriend had heard about his arrest, and she came forward to investigators to tell them that the night of the murders, he had actually called from a club in Houston and asked her to pick him up. They believed that this is where he had dumped the vehicle. It was never found when they went to go look at this club. This was also confirmed because Larry's phone records showed that he called Houston police that night to tell them that him and his girlfriend were being chased by her ex-boyfriend in their car, and he was trying to run them off the road. He confirmed that this, in fact, was Larry Cosby calling, and this was around this same area. But even though they could not find this vehicle at this parking lot anymore, an officer investigating another case was at a vehicle storage lot where he found the abandoned vehicle. The car had been towed after sitting there for a month with no license plate. They just believed that this person would come back to pick it up. They were too drunk to do so or forgotten where it was, but after that month they decided to get it out of there. But when investigators looked inside this car, they found that it was covered in blood, especially in the back, and the mat was completely missing. The blood proved that Crystal was placed on the left side of the trunk while Brittany on the right, and there was also a single shell casing. The only problem was Larry Cosby was actually a 48-year-old man, and the ferryman who had talked to this driver, who had drove them to the dumping ground, about the headlight claimed that the driver was around 20 to 30, but this was said to be possibly because Larry looked quite young for his age, and this sketch also looked nothing like him, but it was dark outside, and it might have been hard for this witness to see him. The driver in this footage also appeared to be much shorter than the 6'5" Larry. But the ferryman was brought in once they had Larry in custody, and he was doing photo lineups. The first photo lineup did not have Larry in it. He picked out a man. He said he was completely confident that that was the man, and it was not Larry. But then a few days later, he was shown a new photo lineup with Larry in it, and he thought about it, and he then identified Larry as the driver, but he said he was only 50% sure. He said that he remembered that the man he spoke to had facial hair, and Larry didn't in the picture and didn't currently. Another witness came forward claiming to see somebody driving that SUV, and they were brought in to do a photo lineup as well, and they immediately chose Larry. Meanwhile, Larry was being held by a $500,000 bond in county jail where he would stay for over a year. The question was, how could a father do this to his daughter? Well, that answer could come from Brittany's mother, Loranda McDonald. She is someone that we talked about briefly. She had given up custody of Brittany to Annie because she was so young, and she hadn't really been in her life since. But she was in contact with Larry throughout the years, and she actually had to find out that her daughter had been murdered through Facebook. But she revealed that she had spoken to Larry a few times about the fact that Brittany was gay. Larry said he didn't like that idea, and Loranda told him that that was Brittany, and she was going to live like that. That was her lifestyle, and he could do nothing about it. Loranda said she had actually left Larry due to his violent tendencies, and now she wanted him to suffer and feel the pain she was feeling because she hates him. She is very angry at him, and she said, I think they should lock him up. Don't let him out. Give him the chair. I want him to suffer.
This is your child. This is something we conceived together. Ain't that much hatred in this world to make you just do this.
Investigators also noticed that in his room he had a copy of the Quran, which is the Islamic holy book, and he had it open to a page where it talks about homosexuality being a sin. Now, civil rights activist Quanell X, who was also the spokesperson for the families, said that Larry had a real warped understanding of the religion of Islam and his position on the gay lifestyle, and Ebony magazine then released an article upon hearing about this case, basically asking for more tolerance in the African American community towards LGBTQ plus people. And gay rights groups actually began to hold vigils for Crystal and Brittany to show support.
Photos of Brittany Cosby and Crystal Jackson are surrounded by flowers and glowing lights. The two were dating for 2 years. Last week, they were found brutally murdered, their bodies in a dumpster. Many believe the women were targeted because of their sexual orientation.
This is the third women that have been murdered here in the state of Texas for simply being who they are, and I think enough is enough. We need to unite.
It's a terrible tragedy that happened that, you know, this couple was found this way.
It's a violent crime that hits close to home for Gina Harris. She's both African American and homosexual. She admits she has been treated differently just because of who she is.
It could be anything. It could be a certain look. It could be a way someone addresses me, but it's not something that ever goes away.
Harris admits she often feels scared.
Things like this or things that have happened to friends of mine that make me think twice about going outside or, you know, looking in a certain direction and things like that.
Crystal's father, Yvonne, came outside of their home where reporters were stood, and he began talking, saying that he did not agree with his daughter's sexual orientation, but he would not have killed his daughter like Larry did. He said he loved his children all the same. Mary was very angry. She said that she had shaken Larry's hand and she had offered to pay for the funeral. Larry's sister, Ebony, said that looking back, the day that the girls' bodies were found, she had rushed home to the Cosby home and she had noticed something strange. You see, Larry immediately told her that Crystal had been killed by a gunshot wound and Brittany had been beaten to death. Then, when he was talking to police moments later, he began acting like he had no idea what happened, and she said that it was like a dog died, not his own daughter. He then went into the kitchen, began eating and drinking beer like nothing had happened. Ebony said that Larry kind of had a history of things and he never went on the straight line path, and even though he was a little odd and had a criminal history, she never believed he would do that. She said that he made her so uncomfortable that she would tell her husband that he was never to stay in their home, and she even knew of a few times when he would say that he liked to scare women by approaching them aggressively. Another possible motive was theorized that possibly Larry had a jealousy about him when it came to Brittany and the way she was living her life. She was really, making a life for herself, buying a car, a home. She had this wonderful girlfriend and her daughter that she loved so dearly, and he had just come out of prison and had nothing. We talked about him being upset about the pizza, but he also allegedly asked them to borrow their car. Brittany said no, and he got upset with her. She had even kind of taken over his bedroom. I mean, he was in prison for 12 years, so she ended up getting the bedroom he used to stay in at that house. So when he came back, she was still staying there. She wasn't going to give it back to him, and he had to stay on the couch. There was also the fact that Annie, the 90-year-old great-grandmother, had changed her will while Larry was away, and Brittany was going to get everything, and Larry was taken out because he was in prison. Yet the truth could be a mix of these theories, one or the other, or none at all. We have no idea because Larry refuses to talk about it. 40 weeks later, Larry still had not been charged with murder due to the lack of scientific evidence. He was banned from talking to any family members until the trial, and then on June 15th, he was officially charged with capital murder. But then he pled not guilty. His defense attorney, Greg Russell, said that there was no direct evidence linking him to the murders and that the witness who saw him on the ferry was uncertain it was him. Family members testified, but Larry didn't, and prosecutors had no motive, confession, or murder weapon. But they went in and they asked the jury to put the pieces together. The trial lasted for over a week, and Larry was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. But in 2017, Larry Cosby appealed his sentence. He believed that the photo lineups had been used against him and that they were very suggestive because he and another man were the only two wearing coats, and he was the only one looking off camera and everyone else was looking directly at it. Other than that, the photos were found to be quite similar, and the ferryman was actually asked if the clothing or, the gaze influenced his identification of Larry, and he said that those facts didn't make a difference. This was found by the Court of Appeals that it was not suggestive, and so this was denied because it did not create misidentification. But he also argued that evidence is insufficient to establish venue in Galveston County due to the evidence showing that Crystal was murdered in Harris County. But the Court of Appeals found that establishing venues is not an essential element of a charged offense. The Code of Criminal Procedure states, if a person receives an injury in one county and dies in another by reason of such injury, the offender may be prosecuted in the county where the injury was received or where the death occurred, or in the county where the dead body is found. All his appeals have been denied thus far. As far as Crystal's baby girl, Zanaya, of course she has grown up quite a bit, but she had nightmares for weeks after this happened because she would later say that she remembered that day. Now, she said that they were at the Cosby home and she was put in the car by her mother, who had started the car and then ran back inside. She then saw Larry come out and take the keys out of the car and go back inside. She decided to follow him after hearing some loud noises, and she asked where her mother was. He told her to go look for her. She did, couldn't find her, but the one place she didn't look was Larry's room. She then asked Larry, "Can I look in your room?" And he told her no. It is believed she was unharmed, untouched, and she is now living with her grandparents, Mary and Yvonne Jackson.
How much do you miss your mommy?
Maybe the last number of all of the numbers, that's the highest number.
And it's heartbreaking to know that not only did this little girl lose her mother and someone who was about to be her mother, but she also had to hear it too. Annie Cosby was the 90-year-old woman who was left then without a great-granddaughter and a grandson who had killed that daughter and was now in prison, and she just couldn't handle it. And a year later, she actually passed away. Why do you believe Larry did this to his daughter and her girlfriend? To me, it seems likely that it's a combination of all of the theories that we talked about. Larry hated that he had no control over Brittany anymore, and he didn't accept his daughter's happiness. I believe that this was a hate crime, something that no one should have to fear, done by a family member that every child should feel safe around, their own father. And he's a disgusting excuse of a man that is exactly where he should be. I don't think anything has shocked me to the core more than this case in finding out that it was her own father. No matter why he did it, it is equally horrific. But don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay. Bye.